New School and the Tishman Center. I'm just going to run a very quick presentation about the 2030 district. We are partnering with the New School Tishman Center on the Energy and Equity Talks. Really happy to do this, and part of our sustainable education model. 2030 district is a partnership of stakeholders in New York City, focused on Lower Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn. Here are some of our property partners listed here. The year 2030 is still the year that the scientists say we're going to fly off into some really dangerous territory if we do not globally level off fossil fuel use and carbon emissions across the globe. 2030 is tomorrow for all intents and purposes. The 2030 Challenge for Planning, which has been adopted across a wide range of stakeholders in the built environment and government and policy, calls for a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from a 2013 baseline in buildings and infrastructure, and a carbon neutral or net zero for new buildings and alteration by the year 2030. This is very ambitious, more ambitious even than New York City's and California's and Paris's targets. We have three partner types: property, service, and community. Our goals are innovation, resilience, equity, advocacy for policies, and somehow financing these goals, which is tough. We connect the dots in our communities and across the continent. There are 20 districts across North America covering over 500 million square feet of properties of real estate. Some of the things that we've done, and we're primarily a volunteer group, published a white paper in 2016, really covering community and collaborative projects that preceded the 2030 district, including eco districts and 2030 districts. We've done a distributed energy forum with AA in New York. We proposed a sustainable community toolkit to the city council just as the pandemic hit. And we also had planned a landlord-tenant workshop that had to be canceled when the pandemic hit. Now, I hope we're getting out of the pandemic. We are actively implementing a project called Heat Cool Smart Brooklyn, which is a community retrofit project across Brooklyn, supported by the Brooklyn Borough President and funded by NYSERDA. And one of our speakers tonight is Eric Darrisaw, who is a member of our group and is leading a project to develop a template for a very high resolution building energy report, which can be a basis for property energy reports across the district and across the city. And the sample we're using for that report is Brooklyn Navy Yard, Building 77. Brooklyn Navy Yard is a property partner of NYC 2030 district, along with New School and Pratt and CUNY Building Performance Lab and some other wonderful organizations. I'm going to turn it back over to Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you for introducing that. And yeah, we're glad to be working with 2030 District on these events. Our first event was really great, and I'm sure this will be a great conversation as well. And on that note, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and this is the order they'll be going in. So first we have Eric Darrisaw. He is a senior consultant with Alternative Energy Services, a national energy services practice, AUS and affiliated company, company's Community Green Energy, which is a community shared solar developer, and On-Site Utility Capital, which is an energy efficiency of service finance energy and finances energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. Eric is the director of Agile Fractal Grid and energy efficiency systems and advanced technology integration firm specializing in microgrids, data centers, building electrical grids, thermal heat capture, and green hydrogen project development. He also advises Sunswarm Solar Inc., a U.S. Department of Energy Sunshot program funded shared solar marketplace database platform for developers and community groups. He is also a governing board member of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, a $4 trillion ESG investor coalition in New York, state director of the Green the Church, a non-for-profit ecumenical organization focused on capacity building and green community development in partnership with Black Church Community Development Corporations. Our next speaker is Gabe Landis. He's been working in the solar energy industry since 2010. Professionally, his dual focus has been in the engineering and construction of large commercial photovoltaic projects and in advocating for innovative solutions to solar project process friction. Gabe's research agenda seeks to dissect energy injustice and illuminate the terrain for energy civil disobedience. His experience spans project execution, strategy, partnerships, logistics, and technology. And since 2018, Gabe has been serving as a consultant to building owners and solar asset owners to support their renewable energy generation goals and system performance optimization. Across all his work, Gabe seeks to make a meaningful, positive impact on the earth, the people, and the communities where he works, and when possible, the urban ecosystem of New York City. He generates and implements innovative tech-forward, ambitious ideas that deliver ecological, social, and financial results. And last but not least, we have Tim Gilman Shefcheek. He's an artist, writer, and neighborhood activist. Also, he holds a PhD. He's the executive director at the RETI Center, a nonprofit based in Red Hook, Brooklyn, that focuses on water and energy as key factors in the just transition to a changing climate. He's a professor at NYU's School Stern of Business, where he focuses on social impact and communications, while researching, writing, and practicing institutional formation and transformation as an art form. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers today. And Eric, I am going to switch it over to you. So each speaker will have 10 minutes to talk a little bit about their projects. Then we'll have some discussion between everyone. So Eric, I will pass it to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share with you all. Let me just share a screen here with you. And I think that where I'm going to start is where we are resident in, and that is New York State. And I think that before you look at any kind of economic development, particularly around renewable energy, you must look at the state's policies and procedures and any other types of initiatives that a state or local jurisdiction, and obviously the regulatory, regulatory environment. So where I thought I would start is kind of describing what's going on right here in our backyard in New York State. And I think the key part of it is, for me, is really understanding, the current environment and the policies that have been put in place by New York State. So I'm going to just share with you real quickly. I'm going to go through each one of these slides, a presentation that was done in 2015 by New York State Energy Research and Development Agency, when they created the Community Distributed Generation Program. And this is a very, very important document because it really sets the framework for how community projects are being basically authorized, reviewed, and there's essentially a queue when you do a community distributed generation project. There is actually a process that you have to go through. You just don't set up a community generation project and interconnect it in a grid. So these slides will be available. I'll make it available to the Tishman Center, but this is just kind of the structure. New York State is very, very unique, where New York State has really made it a point to ensure that there is local participation in the development of community distributed generation projects. The utilities are precluded from actually owning the actual projects because they wanted the development of the community distributed generation project to be built from the ground up. And so they created a framework and a model. And this is part of the law. This was obviously authorized by the Public Service Commission and went through the whole process of creating this framework. So community distributed generation extends New York's current net metering policies and guidelines to expand access to renewable energy. We know that New York State is trying to convert. New York City is trying to convert, reduce carbon emissions, as well as convert. Hopefully, there are some groups that are pushing for 100% renewable energy. But this is the framework in which it started. And it's a very, 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 very interesting model because it specifically creates looks to create partnerships between the private sector and the community, as well as it provides a method in order to work with the utilities, which still distribute, the power through its own, through the backbone of the utility grid. It still gives you your bills and, does the billing and so on and so forth. But it creates a very, very unique structure where it's really encouraging partnerships between the utility, the local community, and the private sector. So here are just some different models. I'm not going to go into each one of these. I just wanted to share with you the structure of the model. So in this particular one, there's a private developer A, right, that wants to develop a project. In this particular instance, the city wants to sponsor that community solar project, and they work together along with the utility and the local community to come together to develop the actual project. There are other examples where co-op could be a sponsor. There's very different types of sponsors that are part of the overall process of organizing a community solar project locally, whether it be through a city or through a local community group, et cetera, so on and so forth.
Eric, I'm not sure your slides are advancing. Or you was there a graphic you're trying to show that illustrates this?
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, I think we have a little.
We're seeing solar for everyone.
Oh, okay. Somehow, let me see. Just 1 second. This must be a technical issue here. Okay. I think what I've done is okay. Well, I'm just going to what I thought I was sharing with you was the actual community distributed generation model that was developed by my startup. But I've described it, so I don't necessarily need to use that slide. But the bottom line of the framework is to create partnerships between the local community, the local developers, as well as the utility to actually come together and collaborate on the project. And community distributed generation project could be solar, it could be wind, it could be a fuel cell project, which I'll talk a little bit about. Any kind of community distributed asset can be technically developed by local partnerships between utility, community groups, private sector. So that's the community distributed generation program. When you look at the issue of developing these projects, particularly around solar, there's a couple of very, very important points, which is really the model that I've developed with SunSwarm, which you see here. And SunSwarm is funded by U.S. Department of Energy to create a community solar marketplace, essentially to be able to match the solar developers, right, along with the local community. But the question is, how does the community participate in a community solar development project? And with that said, that again, part of the framework is the developer has to figure out, well, what role does the community play? And so what we did in terms of the development of our project is that we partnered with the local community board. And SunSwarm is a database platform that essentially does a free screening of residents. They can go onto the platform, they can fill out a questionnaire, they can get information about a local project and determine whether or not they're interested in opting in or being contacted by that developer once that project stands up. Here's an actual, this is our actual project website. I'm going to try to go through this real quickly. This is an actual project website that we've developed. We received a pre-development grant from New York State Energy Research and Development Agency to create this model. And what we basically do is we provide the software and the training to the local groups so they can go out and do the pre-screening and the intake process of local community residents to avoid predatory practices. Because one of the problems in deregulated markets, there's been problems with predatory practices, unsuspecting folks that have been contacted by ESCOs, and there were lawsuits and so on and so forth around that, where people just did not really understand what they were signing in. So we believe that the community groups are essential because they have the trust of the community, but we're just basically providing them the tool and the SunSwarm platform to go out and pre-qualify, right, the local residents, as well as tie the overall energy education process so residents can make informed decisions. So with the website, we have a whole process. Again, I'm going to go through this real quickly. We have a whole process, an education process. You can see, created a video, right? We explained to them how community shared solar works, how the project works, right? All of the things that they need to know, right, prior to signing up for a project. And we're also hitting a very, very key pain point for solar developers, because the biggest cost that put a lot of solar installers out of business is the customer acquisition cost. The big cost, right, to go out there and do the customer acquisition. So by creating a partnership with local community groups and sharing revenue, because there's a cost to acquire, right, customers. And so our model is that developer ought to share that revenue and pay those community organizations that are going out there and doing the intake process. So that's our model. And so we're working with the community board, and but we're starting with education, intake. And I'm moving towards the edge of my my time here. One other thing I want to talk about is that solar, before I pass it back to the panelists, solar is a great option for renewable energy, but there are other ways to provide clean renewable energy. One of the biggest things that is happening now in New York State is the development of clean green hydrogen microgrids. Basically, microgrids that are either where you produce green hydrogen, it powers a fuel cell, or in a particular case on a project that we're working on, a hydrogen turbine to create green hydrogen microgrids. There was an announcement, New York State creates plan for green hydrogen microgrids, right? That's a very, very important development. The new Inflation Reduction Act put $8 billion in to create new hydrogen hubs, to create hydrogen processing facilities, with the idea of creating hydrogen to create distributed DER resources, microgrids that will provide electricity to the grid and add to the capacity of the grid to be able to provide power. So there's a whole program around, but it fits with inside, again, the community distributed generation model. And again, the local organizations are going to have a very key role in educating the local community about all of these DERs, distributed energy resources. And so green hydrogen microgrids are already on the drawing board. Here's a whole piece from NYSERDA on green hydrogen microgrids. And just a little bit, and so why don't I just stop there? There's a lot more. I tried to squeeze a lot of information in, but you get the idea of the community distributed generation program to create partnerships. And there's a direct role for community groups to do the energy education, the intake, all of that, And our model is that we're providing tools in order to do that. So whether you apply the intake process to, qualifying folks that want to opt into a community solar project, it will be the same thing with green hydrogen. Let me stop there.
Hey, thank you so much, Eric. Then I have a couple of questions that will come back on, and there was a question from the audience, so hopefully we get a chance to get to that. So now I'll pass it over to Gabe for your presentation.
Thanks, Mike.
Gabe, take it away.
All right, I'm gonna try to share my screen from the iPad here. I'm in Anaheim, California. I'm at the RE Plus conference. Tried to find a quiet corner here. If there's some noise, I apologize. But it's been a fascinating couple days here. This conference started 20 years ago, and this year there's 20,000 attendees. I've been learning about new technology, new software, solar that delivers environmental benefits and takes care of the land where the solar is sited, and also issues around energy and justice, and how we can deliver solar access to LMI Americans, low moderate income folks. So lots of interesting conversations here. Also a bunch of bankers running around trying to book up projects. So I apologize if it's a little funky here. I'm going to try to pull up my slides. I'm going to press the start broadcast. Again, thanks to Chaim and to Mike for having me. I'm really happy to be part of this event. So I'm going to talk today about a specific type. Eric, I really appreciate the background on community shared solar. I might call it CSS. I might call it CDG. All that's interchangeable. There we are. We got the slides going. Everyone sees there it is. Great. So I'm going to be talking about a unique project type. Here, we'll skip to the next one. This is, so in addition to my work, helping, get solar deployed, working for private companies, interfacing with nonprofits, answering questions about solar, trying to always get to, I usually say, when the question is solar, the answer should be yes. There's lots of different pathways to get there. So I'm also an adjunct instructor at Montclair State. And so some of these slides are from, the issue of energy burden, energy injustice, the structure of the grid, investor-owned utilities. It's a semester-long course. So I'm going to breeze through a lot of this so we can really focus on what I think is coming, what I think we need to put our energy into and get enthusiastic about this idea of cooperatively owned community shared solar. So solar's been expensive. I can circle back to any of this during Q&A. Sorry, it's going to be kind of a, zooming in, zooming out. Costs come down. The solar lease as a major innovation to increasing solar access, right? People can't afford the $25,000, $40,000 upfront cost. But when you financialize the asset, what you're doing is extracting a lot of the financial benefit from the homeowner or the renter, and you're delivering it to other parties. And so that influences where we're putting our energies in terms of the deployment of solar. It's critical to understand that through the capitalist lens, it's a revenue generating asset. So we talk a lot about the kind of life cycle of the solar, and again, those financial benefits it's distributing, from inception through to construction, and then operation. Maybe at year 10, you're replacing an inverter. There's lots of parties that are touching the asset. And in some cases, solar is great because it is shifting power away from the investor-owned utilities. And in some cases, solar is supporting the IOUs. In some states, the IOUs have done a great job of kind of shifting policy so that when solar is deployed, it confers benefits to them. And so the question that's always in the back of my mind is, how can we shift the power structure? How can we, convey some of these benefits to disadvantaged Americans? What is the response to the kind of historic trends I've got some slides here around sacrifices zones, Cancer Alley in Louisiana. The historic harm done with these systems is considerable. And so I think about, what should our response be? How can we as a community deploy solar in a thoughtful way? And so I've got stuff here on energy burden, climate change exacerbating some of the problems around energy burden. I give a nod to energy efficiency. It's always important to talk about energy efficiency before jumping to solar, just in terms of the kind of hierarchy of our energies. But so here we are, community shared solar. And so it's a great tool to deliver immediate solar benefits to people in all kinds of contexts. Because it's one large array, you get economies of scale. The subscribers are seeing benefits on day one. They don't need to take out a loan. They don't need to kind of process the large expense of the asset, for the first 7 years before we're covering the gains at the tail end. And so it's really exciting, in a market that didn't previously have CSS, for the regulators and the utilities to say, yes, we're going to do this, we're going to turn it on. And then the question is, where are these arrays going to go? So over the next 10 years, we're going to have to deploy hundreds of gigawatts of solar. We're talking about land use issues. We're talking about NIMBY. We're talking about planning and zoning. And oftentimes the typical model is, developer identifies a site. Developer wants to put solar there. And that, there's financial value that goes to the developer, and then the asset is constructed, and, banks are deploying capital. And at some point, it's great that Eric has thought about what are the tools to bring disadvantaged Americans into this conversation, to confer the benefits to them, to build that trust, which is so often a major issue. And so, how can we get these benefits to these communities? But so, that there's a conversation about, what's the best location for this array? There's going to be trade-offs. Let's think about, maybe there's a peaker plant in the neighborhood which is contributing to these incredibly high asthma rates amongst African American kids. And so this idea that we need to ideally not just do market signals, but be steering the deployment of these assets to maximize the benefit. And so I'm proposing that we get enthusiastic about cooperative ownership. And so historically, there's been a lot of barriers to co-op CSS because one of the major ways we incentivize these assets in this country is through tax credits. And so you have to have that tax burden in order to use the tax credits. And this excludes low-income folks. It excludes nonprofits. It excludes religious organizations. There's all of these people basically cut out of the equation. It could be 30 to 60% of the value of the solar asset is not used. And so the good news is we're in a new chapter, new paradigm. The Inflation Reduction Act was signed. It's now law of the land. There's considerable money flowing. And in addition, it changes the kind of limitations around the use of the tax credits. And so now all of a sudden it's a lot more liquid, it's tradable. And so you could have a community-based organization, a nonprofit, a community of people that are going to decide to deploy this asset for the benefit of themselves, of their community. And they're able to extract the value of the tax credits. And so my hope is that we see a kind of blossoming in this project type. And so that you can see the little star here on this graphic. The co-op is now a group of people making collective decisions about how much to pay the host, about what kind of discount to give to the power subscribers. Maybe it's not the standard 10 or 5%. Maybe there's an income filter and some folks are getting 30% off their bill. Maybe they're donating some power to some local organizations. And so, and in addition, they're able to consider sites in their neighborhood based on their values. And so it's not, okay, this is the cheapest site. Maybe the better site for for the local community is some underutilized site or some site that's adjacent to, I don't know, an area that gets a lot of pedestrian traffic. Maybe there's going to be a education angle to kind of the benefits that are conferred to the community from the asset. And so it's kind of directed not by the solar developer or whomever owns the asset. And then you also get more interactions with the subscribers, right? So a conventional CSS, somebody subscribes, as long as they're paying their monthly bill, you don't hear from them again unless they move. But so if it's a community asset, now we're talking about engagement, we're talking about ownership, not just kind of on the paper, but emotionally. That's our project. We built that. And so here's a little chart, numerous benefits. There's a ton of financing available. It's been hard to find. There's been a lot of human energy spent on this tax credit piece. How do we help these nonprofits do CSS? That has really fallen away now. We're in a new chapter thanks to the IRA. And so I'll just end here. I think I burned through my time. So in the same way that a cooperatively owned bicycle shop or a food pantry is valuable in lots of different ways, the cooperatively owned CSS really it's a kind of response to the historic harms. It's a response to centralized power, and it's not just solar. It's not just cheaper energy. It doesn't just reduce energy burden, but it's about collective decision making amongst the community in a way that engages them and it aligns with their values. And so yeah, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Gabe. And,
all right, got to end the screen share. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I definitely will have some follow-up questions because I did do some research on community shared solar and how do you work with nonprofit groups, and I'm glad to hear there has been some advancement on the tax credits part because I know that's usually one of the trickiest parts. So yeah, I think I'll have some follow-up questions and hopefully we can make a good discussion out of that. And lastly, we're gonna go with Tim. I can share your slides for you. Let me know when you need me to advance them.
Sounds good. Thank you so much again to Mike and to Chaim for inviting us, and I'm really pleased to be here sharing a third step in this community solar sort of closed loop, in that we are in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and I can actually show you. We were talking about peaker plants. There is a peaker plant right behind us here on Gowanus Bay. We are actually based on a field station, and our floating field station is an education center and a training center. And right now we're running our solar panel training installation program, which is a 3-week-long program where we've recruited out of the low-income community because Red Hook is primarily low-income with a huge public housing project. And we are drawing our students actually from the Bronx and from Staten Island, and I'm sorry, Coney Island, the Bronx, East New York, Sunset Park, and Red Hook. And they're coming down here and learning with us how to actually be some of the folks who will be creating all these giant solar arrays that are going to be going up all over the place. Can you switch slides for me, please? So what you see here is one of the young men who completed our first solar training program last year. We then showed the proof of that success to NYSERDA, who then funded us for our solar training program, where we'll be running 6 cohorts in the next 2 years. And we want to create this green pathway where our trainees will be helping to put up the community solar projects in our neighborhood. And so we'll be creating local power, which is the name of our program, in terms of generating jobs, new knowledge base, new career paths, and also the green energy for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So we have a recruitment process, just as we have a recruitment process for our subscribers, and we are the local organization that's finding all of our subscribers and all of our rooftops for our community solar. we have a similar pathway for finding our interested trainees for our job training program. We've created a very unique training program that is directly in response to what the market is asking. And they're asking for workers to come into the field with not necessarily licensing and certification, but a mindset and an understanding of what the work actually is. So we start out by giving them a full week on sustainability. They learn what the UN's Sustainable Development Goals are. They learn about social entrepreneurship, climate justice, and all the sort of reasons why we're doing what we're doing. And then they learn the actual hands-on skills of installing solar panels. And then we give them the OSHA 40 certification so they can actually walk onto a job site and get a job. We then line them up with some of the solar installers who are so busy doing all these big installations all over the place that they're very happy to have subsidized and acclimated workers coming onto their job sites as interns, and hopefully then turning them into permanent employment positions for these coming from these historically disadvantaged communities, but turning them into the green collar workers of the future. And what we like about the idea of green collar is it's neither blue collar nor white collar. So with all these varied skills that we're teaching them, we're giving them the idea not just of a job entry, but of a career path and of mobility within the field. Because, you know, as we've heard here, the growth is going to be exponential in the market. And so somebody who's starting now with the hands-on skills and an understanding of the systems and an understanding of the reason why is just going to make them that much more valuable as the economy of this renewable energy continues to grow. So our solar system, you know, our community solar system touches on the energy generation. It touches on the job creation and on an innovative approach to educating and involving the new generation in all of this. So I think it complements the two earlier speakers, and that we've gotten I think a good understanding of what community solar is, but we wanted to just make sure that we were adding to who's actually benefiting from it, not just on the receiving end of the energy, but actually on the construction end of this massive construction and building boom that we're going to be seeing as solar panels go up all over the place. So I will finish there and then go to questions because I think hopefully there'll be some good discussion coming out of all this different information that you guys have been and that I've also been learning from everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. And now we're gonna get into facilitate discussion between everyone. So I had a question I usually ask when I moderate panels like this. What is something, and you all can go whatever order you like. What is something new that you learned, or something interesting you learned from what one of the presenters said? So if anyone would like to go first. I will say I learned a lot, but would anyone like to go first to answer that?
Well, I one of the things that I learned here, and I just listening to Gabe, and I have met in the past, and when I rolled out the platform, I actually presented to him when he was at City University. So he was one of the first, folks in the solar development field at City to hear the story of what we were trying to do with the DOE, Department of Energy. But I really like his cooperative model, because I think, you're going to need innovation to own the underlying distributed energy resources and the assets, and how you finance that and how you create community ownership is going to require a new model. But then again, it's not a new model, because you look at a lot of the gas utilities throughout the country, they're cooperatives. The gas cooperatives, the electricity cooperatives. So that's not new. It's the fact that he's applying that and getting that at the local level, particularly in disadvantaged communities. It'll be very, very interesting to hear how he develops that.
Can you guys hear me okay? I had to switch audio devices.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, great. So I just wanted to flag Tim's framing of green collar jobs as not blue, not white. It kind of hybridizes that. It's its own category because it's true. It's been remarkable for me walking around here, just the spectrum of humans and professional. Carhartt is here trying to sell dungarees, and then there's people in very nice suits, and there's a sense of like collective mission that like we're all in this, and I think that green color captures that nicely. That kind of mental framework for how we think about people that are in this field.
I'd like to say that I really was very interesting to hear what Gabe said about one of the features of the IRA. I'm not sure. I mean, it's a big and complicated bill. Certainly, the story about how it got here. There should be a Russian novel written about that. But the idea that there's a way to actually trade the tax credits, or maybe renewable energy certificates or some other benefits. I understand how not-for-profits and community groups and low moderate income stakeholders wouldn't be able to use those tax credits, especially if they're property taxes. But being able to transform those into a tradable asset is something wonderful, because this is valuable stuff, right? As Gabe said, and I think as Eric said as well, the challenge is to take this sort of out of the investor-owned utility model, where a large corporation makes money off of selling energy to everybody else, and allow people to become players on a more level playing field, in terms of community solar, in terms of the labor force, in terms of the laws of and the regulations around land use. I mean, this is, I'm an architect, and I just see this sort of stagnation in our understanding of what buildings are, what mechanical equipment is, what infrastructure is. All this is going to change when we understand that renewable energy is not, a power plant. It's part of the environment, and that goes for solar and wind and geothermal and green infrastructure and all that other good stuff. So the idea that there can begin to be cooperative ownership and cooperative financial, sharing of financial benefits along with the energy and environmental benefits is very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out, and I hope Tim and all of us here are going to play a role in that.
And I have a second question about, and I think all of the panelists may have an idea on this, because when I worked on, I've done work and research into community shared solar projects and how those work, and how there is sometimes a lack of communication between the key stakeholders, be it the developer, the financer, the community group. So keeping that in mind, what are some of the timelines you see for these projects being able to get off the ground in a community, like to go from a community saying, hey, we would like to do this, to actually having ownership of that asset? Because I know the ownership can take a while, because that community group may have to build capacity to run the programs, and like how do you bring in like experts to do the creating the subscriber database, and like how do you manage where the credits go? So I'd like to know if you all have any insight on about how long it may take to get a project, be it community shared solar or another type of community distributed generation project going.
Yeah, I have a very, very specific, Mike. This is, in the development of these projects are not really well understood. again, you got to understand the dynamics of the market. And so one of the reasons why the DOE funded the community shared solar platform is for the purpose of accelerating the market. And so it's a massive cost, right? In order to go in and do the conversion, get folks to sign up to be part of a local community solar project. But from the developer standpoint, having that pre-qualification done. So for instance, as they stand up a project, they don't want to have to hold on to the asset. So in the mortgage markets, one of the things that why there was a tanking of the mortgage market is that developers went out and built all of these massive, subdivisions and so on and so forth, thinking that it would sell, only having to hold it in inventory. And that was a risk. And the same thing could happen if you go out and you build all of these community solar assets and you don't have the subscribers. That's a financial risk for capital. And then some of the things that I saw in Gabe's model and being able to run the credit risk analysis. All of that has to be done before you break ground. So the idea is coming together and having the community groups be involved in that pre-qualification, be involved with, some of the underwriting, right, of those actual subscribers is very, very critical, because if you can deal with that issue and you go through the pre-qualification and the underwriting, then it will accelerate capital going into the marketplace. And that's going to be very, very critical. That's really the first step. And you don't actually need to have a project up. That's why we're focusing on building that capacity and doing database and analytics development in order to basically make the market, right? Because it does take time, okay, in order to, think about going in the middle of Brownsville, right? And then avoiding, some, predatory practice. Congressional Black Caucus started complaining about solar installers because they felt like they were engaging in predatory practices. So there's a process here. And so the real step is really doing that education and that intake that would help accelerate the development market and capitals flowing in.
Mike, I'll just share, like, the solar piece is maybe 10 to 12 months, right? So once you've got a site, you start doing some engineering drawings. You're gonna apply for a build permit. In the meantime, you're gonna be teeing up your procurement. It might be 30 days after you place an order for modules to arrive to site. The build could be, 6 weeks to 3 months. And then there's the kind of tail end where you're asking Con Ed to turn on, we want to energize. And then they're going to ask for a bunch of paperwork. In a CSS instance, they want to see all the meter numbers of everyone that's going to receive credits from the asset. And then you're on. And then it's going to run for 20 years. It'd be good to get a maintenance contract. Someone's going to check on it every year, maybe wash the panels. They're going to know the fuse sizes in case something goes wrong. But so as a construction project, that's pretty fast. There's apartments in New York City where it'll take you longer to renovate your kitchen, and that's great news. But there's a ton of activity that happens on the front end, especially in the cooperative model that I'm proposing. Right, so community group organizes, and they may have a mission. They may have other programs. It might be environmental justice related. It might be about air permits for an incinerator, but they're going to have to make the pivot, find the funding to get organized, select the site. They're going to want to run an RFP. They're going to want to find someone to do the build. There's going to be conversations about with NYSERDA about incentive monies, and all of that is going to precede the kind of, we're ready to place the order for the modules. I will say though, in my mindset used to be New York City, tons of humans, not a lot of land. There's always going to be a wait list for subscribers, right? You do have to vet them, as Eric said, but in terms of numbers, if someone moves and falls out, there's always going to be someone else in the queue. can backfill. It's one of the reasons that the revenue is so reliable from a CSS asset. The old model was you'd sell all your power to Joe's Ford dealership, and you had to make sure that he was creditworthy and he was going to pay the bill every month. With CSS, it's like insects. I think maybe that's why Eric named the platform Sun Swarm, right? So you've got lots of subscribers in there. So if there's turnover, it's okay. But I did hear recently that Community Shared in New Jersey is really struggling to find subscribers. People are building projects and they're half subscribed. So they're generating power, all this power is going on the grid, and they're not hitting subscriber accounts. And a lot of that is because when COVID hit, there was no outreach. So the message didn't get out to folks who live in New Jersey about this opportunity. And so that's an interesting story about kind of timing and geography and awareness. But one of the nice things about the cooperative model is you've got the kind of momentum and energy of the community, right? So I don't foresee with co-op CSS difficulty on getting the subscribers in. I think it's on the front end in terms of identifying sites and kind of, you're going to have to file, for an LLC in Delaware. You're going to have to make sure that all the paperwork is tidy. You're going to have to cover liabilities, and that's a huge learning curve for those community groups, which is why I'd like to see one of the tools we're putting out in the world is kind of a package, a kit, tools for community groups that want to pursue this, because I think we got to figure out how to scale it.
If I can, I'll go on in my own experience of having started a community solar program about 6 months ago, and we have 2 rooftops coming online in the beginning of one at the end of this year, and then the other in the beginning of next year. And one of them was a condo building where they had already decided they were putting a solar system on, and then the idea of joining and putting that system into a community solar network means that we're going to get their subscribers for them. We're going to basically take the concern about what they're going to do with their energy off of their hands. It allows us to more quickly be providing power than we thought we were going to be able to do, because it's not a new build. It's a system that's actually sort of fallen into our laps. That's the one. And then the other one is a small art space that doesn't have the money to put on a system, isn't going to own anything, isn't even going to offset their own electric. They're basically just going to be generating income from a roof lease and the tax abatements. And so for a small arts organization that happens to be based in an old warehouse building, they're looking at about $50,000 benefit for doing something with an asset, which is their rooftop, that they would not be doing anything with otherwise. So that part that Eric was talking about coming up with the money, getting it together and all that, it wasn't a necessary step. It allowed us to be offering community generated power very quickly to our subscriber base that we're actively recruiting. And knowing that there is a benefit that's going directly to an arts organizer in the neighborhood, and then the one of the solar investment companies, yes, they'll be getting the majority of the profit off the program, but it's also allowed us to electrify with renewable energy more quickly than if we'd been trying to actually raise the money within the community itself to own the system.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Looks like you have a question, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But Eric, did you have? I see you're sharing something. Was there something that you wanted to add as well? Oh, you're muted.
No, I think that what both Gabe and Tim saying is all part of it. It's really the capacity building. A lot of the focus has been on the construction side, but what about the tech, the energy tech training, right? I have a technology that's been funded by New York State Energy Research that does, that converts excess heat in buildings to electricity. And it has huge implications for, heat loss, which is, really a big problem, but there's literally billions of dollars in revenue that you can generate just from capturing the excess heat. They've just passed thermal heat networks. And so there are all sorts of technologies that are out there in the marketplace. What we decided to do was focus in on building the capacity of and training the local groups. So we're working with the Environmental Justice Alliance, Nos Que Damos, that's part of, to try to educate them and say there's a revenue opportunity for you to build skills that will help drive the development process. And you can start with that now. And that's what NYSERDA wanted to see us develop and fund and train. That was their reason why and it is a pre-development cost. That is pre-development. And so you are part of the development process. So we have to accelerate that because that's going to impact the market and the ability to be able to scale quickly.
I have a question for all of you. It's just I'm curious about some of the EJ, environmental justice and accessibility questions that may come up in the work you do. For example, with green hydrogen, like I think it can be a source of renewable energy, but like it's very I think you have to be very delicate about how you do that, like about how you produce it, where it goes, like where the plants go, and how much of that should you use versus electrification, because I know there's been a lot of excitement about green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, but there's also a lot of negative effects that hydrogen could have on environmental justice communities. That for instance, and then also for the placement and disposal of solar assets, because you have 20 years that you'll probably have to replace those panels. What happens when we have to replace those panels? Do we recycle them? Do we just throw them away because they're going to end up going to probably EJ communities, if not in the US, somewhere in Western Africa or China? So I'd be curious to hear about the access and environmental justice ramifications you all have thought about in the work that you're doing, and just speak to that a little bit.
If the question was about hydrogen, that's we can do a whole discussion around that. But the model that we're bringing to market is on-site production, and the only byproduct of a true green hydrogen process is water. And being able to have gas turbines that can burn green hydrogen without emissions, and all of that has already been developed. And when you look at Con Ed, as they're decommissioning nuclear plants, there's a huge need all over the country for additional power to be added to the grid. But what are you going to burn? Are you going to do coal? Where are you going to find the power? The other problem is that with solar and wind, it's intermittent. And because the intermittency, it causes all sorts of problems. So you need other types of assets. So in my mind, the 4 legs of the stool are combined, heat loss, thermal heat, being able to capture that, convert it to electricity. Hydrogen, truly green hydrogen. I'm not talking about blue hydrogen. I know there's been a whole lot of talk about blue hydrogen. The process that we've developed with the Gas Technology Institute, which is a leading institute in the United States, we can use aluminum and recycle the aluminum. Every time we can recycle it 6 times. And at the end of that cycle, we can go in and recycle it again and turn it back to 99% purity. And so it's the aluminum is basically reprocessed with hydropower. So, there are some environmental concerns, but you got to really understand the different grades in terms of hydrogen, whether blue or gray or pink. There is an education process and a whole issue of how you commission these plants. And so the Gas Technology Institute, whom we're working with, is the advisors of the gas industry, and all of the gas industry are trying to figure out how to get off of natural gas, right? And how do you start blending and slowly? So there's a whole set of issues. The environmental justice community is interested in getting rid of natural gas. What are you going to replace with natural gas? Hydrogen is really the asset. And can you produce that without the environmental impacts that you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I know it is a very complicated, and like you said, there has to be a lot of education done. And I think, there are, I think from EJ groups, a lot of concerns that are valid. And I think it's worth looking into how you actually create these truly green hydrogen projects, and that they're held accountable, like the producers are held accountable. Is there, Gabe, did you, or Tim, is there anything that you wanted to add about the EJ accessibility or any other sort of the more justice facing components of the work you were doing or that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, one, the issue that we face in, like, specifically looking very locally in Red Hook, is that 80% of our population is in public housing, and they can't be solar customers of ours until NYCHA can come around to actually putting panels on the rooftops of our buildings in Red Hook, as they have in other neighborhoods. So one of our reasons for starting our workforce training program in parallel was to actually, sort of share some of this benefit. We're also going to be starting a community fund that will have, some opportunities for public amenities or public assets to be created for even those who can't subscribe to the community solar and get the direct savings benefit. So that's one element of what we want to do. Obviously, the free solar training, the job creation, the pathway into some of the installers who are going to be putting up our community solar installations and other job opportunities that we're able to create for our EJ communities. That's really offsetting, we think, of the work that we're doing of the greening of energy, but also addressing the deep social divides that clean power has to be very careful of what it's doing with job creation, what it's doing with power generation. We have another program that I actually put into the chat, and this is we're just starting to speculate on how we can make it work. Is we have a sister organization in Malawi. It's called the Zayed Center for Solar Energy, and we are gathering decommissioned solar panels, like 60-watt panels, that are no longer attractive for use in the United States, and transporting them over there for their deployment in areas with no electric infrastructure. And then we have a small device that we are starting to manufacture that will allow direct draw off of those panels. So for very low energy uses, but essentially an almost free alternative to burning biomass. For about, our estimates right now is for about $175 for one household, we can stop them from having cooking fires inside of their houses, which means no more wood getting burned, no more carrying of the wood or of the dung or whatever the heat source is. So we think that's a terrific fate for what would otherwise be green waste from developed countries. It's just a question of getting these things distributed equitably, transported affordably, but basically turning our this planned obsolescence of the solar technology into an asset for a different context.
Mike, I've got like an hour and a half of thoughts on that question around environmental justice and access, and then also waste and recycling. But I'll just hit on a couple items. So at a kind of infrastructure level, National Grid wants to open a new gas facility in this neighborhood. They've modeled population growth and increased consumption It's their business as usual approach. They go to the regulators, they ask for permission, and usually it's there's a lot of kind of backroom conversations before it becomes public information, and then you get an entity like Sane Energy, organizing protests and saying, no, there's a better way to do this. And it used to be that there wasn't an economic better way to do it 10 years ago. But now with the dramatic price reductions in solar and also storage, there is a cheaper and better way to do it. And it's with deploying solar plus storage. And we've seen evidence of this technology being used to support the grid in California through patches of incredible demand. And the reality is we need the engineers inside of the utilities who do the resource planning and the projections, the people that make the reports and present to the regulators and say, oh, you should, let us do it the old way. We need that culture shift. And then we also need engagement from regular folks and NGOs to, say to the regulators, don't approve this. Force them to do it the better, newer way. And so that's like a lot, large systems. And that shift is gonna have a demonstrable impact on, these polluting facilities in these neighborhoods, the sacrifice zones that I have that slide on about this kind of, this bargain, this devil's deal that we make, where it's like, well, we want to have this level of comfort on our, the way we live, and so there's gonna be some people that have to live, with harm to their bodies, and so we can undo that. We can change that. It's going to be a long process, but we have all the tools right now. And then just in terms of the manufacturing of the solar, it used to be that a solar panel would have to run for 2 years to offset the carbon it took to make the panel. But now with manufacturing improvements, that's come down to like 6 or 8 months, which is great. That means that for the remaining 19 years it's making electricity, it's just clean green electricity. But there is considerable harm that happens where the panels are manufactured. Huge coal plants in China, the extraction of raw materials. We don't use at scale panels with heavy metals anymore. It's basically cooked sand. The frame is recyclable. The glass is recyclable. So I think as the industry scales and this becomes the predominant way that we generate energy, we're going to see economies, businesses sprout up around module recycling, and then also, as Tim was saying, secondhand modules. The same way when the Rams win the Super Bowl, the shirts that say Bills won, that goes to Senegal, and our shoes go to Nigeria. Or used sneakers go to Nigeria. We're going to see a secondary market that's global for used modules, because they still make energy after year 20. They're still making energy at year 25. And so I actually think that solar, in addition to reducing energy costs and being carbon free, it addresses a lot of our concerns when we think about this kind of constellation of issues around resource consumption and impacted populations. I'll just pause it there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for all of you for addressing that. And I just want to open up questions to the audience since we have about 15 minutes left. Like, I see that Sylvia has a question. If you'd like, you can unmute yourself and ask your question of the panelists, or you can put in the Q&A. I know we had some other questions in the Q&A as well, but Sylvia, if you'd like to
Yes, hi. Yes, thank you. I'm a mom of 2, so I have to leave in a minute and get my kids ready for their homework and stuff. Yeah, so my name is Sylvia Kotia. I have a HVAC company. It's WMBE Heating and Cooling. We're licensed in the 5 boroughs. We specialize 5 boroughs: Westchester, Long Island, and Yonkers, Jersey as well. And we specialize in heating, cooling, mechanical engineering, residential, commercial, and industrial. My question is, my Q&A is, how is that we're incorporating this with, contractors or companies like myself in this? Because we are definitely heavily involved in ventilation and, in ventilation and climate change and global warming, it plays a big role. HVAC plays a big role. So how is this incorporating, since no one's really, I haven't heard anyone in discussion about,
Can I answer that question, Sylvia? Because our group, He Cool Smart Brooklyn, is retrofitting buildings throughout Brooklyn to air source heat pumps to replace heating and cooling, your typical gas-fired or oil-fired boilers and window air conditioners, which are very inefficient and actually burn fossil fuels on site and dirty up the air in your building and your neighborhood. So we're doing that. We're on track to complete 100 wonderful family homes in Brooklyn. Even though we started right with the pandemic, we still managed to do that. We're working very hard on some multifamily buildings. And our approach is really a whole building approach. So, the buzzword today is electrification, meaning electrify your heating and cooling with an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump, not so much ground source in New York City, but around the state, there's a good deal of that. So the air source heat pump technology, if your company is not yet.
we have been installing them.
You
So-
have been.
Yes.
Are you working with the cold climate, the ones that provide both heating and cooling?
Yes.
So that's the ticket. Now, if you combine insulating a building with an air source heat pump that gives you very efficient heating and cooling, and by the way, very comfortable, as opposed to steam heat, which you can't control, air source heat pumps lets you control, each room really, what temperature and how much you want to use it. But you can also install solar, and then you're making clean energy to feed, to offset the electricity, a lot of the electricity that you're using, especially in the summertime during the peak. And so I'd love to talk to you about how your company can get involved in what we're doing. There are community campaigns across the state doing this work. And, we're really working on trying to get your companies, work and get you involved in this. And there's no reason that you couldn't, develop, either partner with a solar company or, develop that yourself. And maybe even, partner with a company that does insulation and, building energy efficiency. And that's the picture. If we can lower the demand by making the buildings more efficient and put in efficient electric equipment, and clean the grid by making more energy with solar and wind. And by the way, there are some new small wind technologies coming on board that might help to generate energy at night when the sun isn't shining. And we work all together and do some of the projects on a cooperative and community basis that we're talking about. Then we're gonna beat this problem. So I would love to talk to you. If you can get in touch with me.
Yes. And yes.
I will put my my email in the chat, and we can talk about that. But it is a kind of whole building and all hands on deck kind of challenge. I'm so glad to hear that you joined us this evening.
Awesome. Thank you as well. Yeah, someone had reached out to me and told me to join in. So I did. So I said, it was last minute, but I said, let me connect. There's a lot of connections at HVAC companies that we work together. So I definitely look forward. Let me send you my company information on here as well.
Great. And you're going to hire some people from Tim's workforce training program.
Why not?
Why not?
Yes, why not? That's definitely, we've been doing, we've been hiring throughout the summer. It's been very difficult, but
It's hard.
Obviously, yeah, it's hard, but we've done that, and we had, project management interns that we got involved as well. We did help them as well. So yeah, we're definitely in the process of doing that. Not a problem at all.
Okay, Jetway HVAC.
Yeah, Sylvia,
Thank you.
I'll just say that At the scale of the solution we need to the problems we're facing, we need a lot more data sharing, right? So the old model was, oh, this person said no to solar, I'll put them in my database as disqualified and move on to the next house. And now what we need is communication, and maybe that'll be the next platform Eric builds. But every house that gets DQ'd, there should be a community shared solar person that gives that person a call. Every time someone gets a new boiler or new HVAC or installation, they should go and as Eric will tell you, these leads have value, right? They're reducing sales and marketing friction for other entities. But so someone wants an EV, right? All of this data has to be shared and circulated amongst organizations. DCAS runs a lot of buildings in the city. New School has a lot of instructors and students, and this idea that everyone has some kind of interest that can be satisfied, and it represents economic activity and carbon reductions. That data's got to flow. It can't be siloed if we're gonna hit the problem at the scale we need.
Awesome. Thank you so
Right.
much. And just wanted to let those know as well, we are WMBE, so there's a lot of people who want to meet the goals. We do have that as well, so if that helps.
Yeah, there's all sorts of technologies, the data science of this, that's what I was saying to you. I know that a lot of, focus has been on the construction side, but it's the data science behind it is really fascinating opportunity for training. So, one of the things that Jaime and I have been working on is there's a very basic platform that was developed by NREL called Buildy that we can train folks on, and that will help them with the energy and collect data, and there's all sorts of analytics. That's a very, very valuable skill, especially in this market, with a market that there's literally not enough people to do this work. It's what we don't want to happen, and I'll just share this real quickly, is that when I got involved in this, I was in Washington. I was a senior economic advisor to the A. Philip Randolph Institute, to the Black labor organization, and they, some of the activists at the Laborers International Union wanted to begin to unionize, put together a union model around energy efficient renewables and so on and so forth. But what they had found is that they had put a lot of training money in, but there weren't any projects or jobs. So in order to put people to work, we have to accelerate the project side of it. And there's there's training money, there's all sorts of partners that you can bring in that will help to accelerate your work. But we need data analytics to be able to accurately target where those opportunities are, and that's I think that's a whole training discipline, Tim. I'm sure in terms of just training them on software and analytics and those types of skills, which will uncover the data to drive the market.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a demand for skills and work all up and down the scale. And I think what we have right now is an opportunity, because it appears to me that with the money that's coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, there are, and I'm just learning about this because it's pretty, it's a pretty complex piece of legislation, but they have, along with a lot of incentives, there's a kind of revolving loan fund that's in there, that's sort of, that's I don't know if it's 20-some billion dollars, but it's a substantial amount of money that's really established to leverage other projects and investments. So when Sylvia talks about her business and growing her business, and we're talking about the challenges to provide financing and opportunities to build community-based and cooperative renewable energy installations. There's these enormous sources of funds. The program-related funds of foundations and corporate investments that are out there, but it's a matter of kind of, as Derek was saying, putting the proposals together in a way that is solid and convincing, rearranging the assets and rearranging the resources. The resources out there are like the cash flow of all the people who are going to be paying electric bills and are paying gas bills, off into the future. That's a resource, right? But we need to capture that and leverage the funding and the other opportunities that are out there to create these community-based assets. And it's a real challenge. And I got to say, we got to put all the best minds and the best energy to work right now, because it appears to me that the pieces of the puzzle are there and the resources are there. We just need to take advantage of it. I hope all of you wise people can help us put this together.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone because we are coming up on time, and I'd like to thank all of our panelists and Chaim for joining us, and I'd like to thank everyone who came on and listened and asked questions. I think one of the things we've learned is that it really does take all of us working together and sharing information and sharing our expertise to really make a dent in climate change, and we have to make sure that we're doing this from an equitable, fair and just lens. It's good to say that, but we should actually do that in practice. So again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I wanted to know if any of the panelists had any last words to share. If there's any one word you'd like to share for your last word, please, we could go around quickly and then we can let everyone go.
Community. Community.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Gabe said community. I have to have a couple more words than that. I just want to say that I would love to be, as we're doing community solar, to be putting up wind at the same time. I know there's a little bit of shading that goes on, but it just would be so great, since we're on the rooftops, to be putting up turbines as well as solar panels, and just kind of like increasing the power creation from a little bit different source.
Oh, thanks. And Eric, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I just had to switch modes. I am here to work with all of you. This is, wow, there's just not enough hours in the day to do all this work. Any of my tools that I'm working on, whether it be from our heat loss capture and turning it into electricity, any of the technologies, we're gonna need to build a workforce. The technologies just don't get installed by themselves. You got to build a workforce, and this is a new workforce. So I'm available, to work with any of you on any aspects of your models. Gabe, I'd like to learn more about your financial model. I have my models too. I have a green bond model. It's a collaboration. That's what it's going to take.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chaim, for working with me to bring this together. And I hope everyone has a good night. And we will be sharing the recording with everyone. If you'd like to watch it again, we'll put it on our YouTube page probably in a couple of days. And again, if you go to tishmancenter.org and go to Climate Week, you'll see we have some cool events coming up, like a really big event tomorrow that's going to be in person. So if you are vaccinated, you can come to that event. We do, because at the school we have very, very strict vaccination, just to make, for safety reasons and health reasons. But if you're interested, check out tishmancenter.org, and everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Happy Climate Week,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.